The Galactic Military Academy is that it wasn't built for humans. Hell, humans weren't even supposed to be there. But here we were anyway, because apparently the universe has a twisted sense of humor. My name is Kira Voss, and I'm one of exactly 12 humans stupid enough to accept admission to this frozen nightmare they call higher education. The Academy sits on Helix Prime, a planet where the warmest day of the year still makes Antarctica look like a tropical paradise. Most of the alien species here have natural advantages. The Kethvar have 3 layers of insulating chitin. The Mordani generate their own body heat through some weird metabolic process. And the Zilthari, well, they're basically living icicles, so they feel right at home. Me, I'm just a human with standard issue thermal gear and an attitude problem. Attention, cadets. The voice of instructor Veltar echoed through the preparation chamber, his 6 eyes gleaming with what I could only assume was sadistic pleasure. Today you face the Ice Maze trial. This test has been designed to evaluate your tactical thinking, environmental adaptation, and survival instincts under extreme conditions. I glanced around at my fellow cadets. There was Thorn Blackridge, a fellow human who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, and about 30 aliens of various species, all looking significantly more confident than they should have been. The Mordani were practically vibrating with excitement, their fur already thickening in preparation for the cold. The Kethvar were clicking their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The rules are simple, Veltar continued, his voice dripping with the kind of enthusiasm that made me want to punch something. Navigate the maze, reach the center, retrieve the crystal beacon, and return to the starting point. Oh, and try not to freeze to death. The temperature inside the maze is negative 47 degrees Celsius, and the walls are coated with a friction-reducing compound that makes climbing impossible. Great. Just great that a Zilthari cadet named Frostwing raised one of his crystalline appendages. Instructor, what is the time limit for this exercise? Veltar's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile if you squinted and had a very generous definition of the word. There is no time limit. However, prolonged exposure to these temperatures will result in complications. For most species, you have approximately 3 hours before hypothermia becomes a serious concern. 3 hours. I did some quick mental math. For humans, that estimate was probably closer to 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours if I was lucky, and kept moving. The Academy's medical files on human physiology were notoriously incomplete, which meant they were basically guessing when it came to our survival parameters. Any questions? Veltar asked, though his tone suggested he'd rather eat his own tentacles than answer them. Thorn raised his hand. What happens if we don't make it back? Then you will serve as an excellent case study for our xenobiology department, Veltar replied cheerfully. Next question. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't just a test. It was a death trap disguised as an academic exercise. The Academy had a reputation for pushing cadets to their limits, but this felt excessive even by their standards. The preparation chamber's massive doors slid open with a grinding sound that made my teeth ache. Beyond them lay the entrance to the ice maze, a tunnel carved from solid ice that glowed with an eerie blue phosphorescence. The air that rolled out was so cold it made my breath visible instantly, and I hadn't even stepped inside yet. Cadets, you may begin when ready, Veltar announced. Remember, only one beacon exists at the center. First to claim it wins. Everyone else, well, you'd better hope you can find your way back before the cold claims you. The alien cadets began filing into the maze with varying degrees of confidence. The Mordani went first, their natural cold resistance making them obvious favorites. The Kethvar followed, their chitinous armor clicking against the ice walls as they disappeared into the blue-tinged darkness that I watched as cadet after cadet vanished into the maze, each one seemingly better equipped for this challenge than the last. When it was finally my turn, I took a deep breath of the frigid air and stepped into the tunnel. The cold hit me like a physical blow. Even through my thermal gear, I could feel it seeping into my bones, making my muscles tense up involuntarily. The walls around me were smooth as glass and covered with that friction-reducing compound Veltar had mentioned. One touch confirmed what I'd suspected. Climbing was definitely out of the question. The maze was a three-dimensional nightmare of intersecting tunnels, dead ends, and vertical shafts that seemed to go on forever. Bioluminescent strips provided just enough light to see a few meters ahead, but beyond that was nothing but blue-tinged darkness and the sound of my own breathing that I could hear the other cadets moving through the maze, their voices echoing off the ice walls in distorted whispers. Someone was already lost, judging by the panicked clicking sounds coming from somewhere above me. Another cadet was muttering what sounded like prayers in a language I didn't recognize. The smart thing would have been to move carefully, mapping the maze as I went, trying to solve it like a puzzle. That's what the Academy expected us to do. That's what any sensible species would do. But here's the thing about humans that the Academy instructors never quite seem to understand. We're not always sensible. Sometimes we're completely, utterly insane that I looked at the smooth ice beneath my feet and had what could generously be called an idea, or more accurately described as a moment of pure human stupidity. The floors were just as slick as the walls, covered with the same friction-reducing compound. While everyone else was struggling to maintain their footing, treating the slippery surface as an obstacle to overcome. I sat down. The cold immediately soaked through my thermal gear, making me gasp, but I ignored it. Instead, I pushed off from the wall with both hands and let momentum carry me forward that I was sliding. Not walking, not running, not carefully picking my way through the maze like some kind of civilized being. I was sliding down the corridors like a kid on the world's most dangerous slip and slide, using my boots to steer around corners and my hand to control my speed that IT was absolutely terrifying. It was completely reckless. It was the most human thing I could have possibly done. And it was working. While the other cadets were struggling to move at a snail's pace, fighting against the slippery surface with every step, I was gliding through the maze like I'd been born to it. The ice that was their enemy became my ally. The friction-reducing compound that made walking treacherous turned the entire maze into my personal highway. I could hear the other cadets cursing in various alien languages as I shot past intersections, their confused voices growing fainter as I left them behind. Someone shouted something that sounded like an accusation of cheating, but I was already 3 corridors away and picking up speed. The maze tried to slow me down with sharp turns and sudden elevation changes, but I adapted. A quick shift of weight to take a corner, a hand against the wall to slow down before a drop, a push-off to accelerate down a straightaway. I was learning the physics of the maze as I went, turning what should have been a careful puzzle into a high-speed game of 3-dimensional pinball. 30 minutes in, I reached the first major intersection I'd seen. 5 tunnels branched off in different directions, including one that sloped sharply upward and another that seemed to drop into darkness. Most of the alien voices had faded to distant echoes, but I could still hear them struggling somewhere in the maze's depths. I paused for a moment, catching my breath and trying to get my bearings. The cold was starting to get to me. I could feel it in my fingers and toes, that sharp ache that promised frostbite if I wasn't careful. But I was making progress, real progress, while everyone else was still trying to figure out how to walk on ice. That's when I heard it, a sound that made my blood run cold, and not because of the temperature. It was the unmistakable noise of someone in serious trouble, the kind of desperate, panicked breathing that meant hypothermia was setting in. I followed the sound down the left-hand tunnel, sliding carefully now, controlling my speed. What I found there made me stop completely. It was Zilmoth, one of the Kethvar cadets. He was huddled against the wall, his usually gleaming chitin now dull and frost-covered. His mandibles were chattering uncontrollably, and his 6 eyes were unfocused. "Hey," I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. "You okay?" He looked up at me with obvious confusion. "Human? How did you get here so quickly? I've been walking for." He trailed off, unable to remember. I slid closer, assessing the situation. His natural armor was supposed to protect him from cold, but apparently there were limits. The Academy's environmental data on the Kethvar was probably as incomplete as their files on humans. "Listen," I said, making a decision that was either compassionate or completely insane. "You need to get moving or you're going to freeze to death down here." "Cannot move," he replied, his voice slurring slightly. "Too cold." Too slippery. Cannot maintain balance. I looked at him, then at the ice beneath us, then back at him. Another terrible, wonderful, completely human idea was forming in my mind. Trust me on this, I said, positioning myself behind him. This is going to sound crazy, but I need you to sit down. Seat on ice. That is. His protest died as he realized he didn't really have any other options. With some coaxing, I got him seated on the ice. Then, before he could object, I gave him a gentle push. He slid forward about 3 meters before friction brought him to a stop, his eyes wide with surprise. Human, what are you doing? Teaching you to think like a human, I replied, sliding up beside him. The ice isn't your enemy. It's transportation. Stop fighting it and start using it. For the next 10 minutes, I gave Zilmoth a crash course in ice sliding. How to steer with his feet, how to control speed with his hands, how to use momentum instead of fighting it. He was a quick learner, and his natural coordination gave him advantages I didn't have. Soon, we were both gliding through the maze together, him following my lead as I navigated the twisting corridors. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was helping my competition, potentially costing myself the victory. But watching him slowly recover from hypothermia, seeing the life come back into his movements, made it worth it. This is highly irregular, he said as we rounded another corner. But effective. Welcome to human logic, I replied. Sometimes the best solution is the one that sounds completely insane. We encountered 2 more cadets in similar states. A more Danny whose fur had frozen solid, making movement almost impossible, and a Zilthari who had somehow managed to get stuck in a corner, her crystalline body too rigid to navigate the tight turn. Each time, I stopped to help. Each time, I taught them the same lesson. Stop fighting the environment and start working with it. Soon, our little group had grown to 5, all of us sliding through the maze like some kind of bizarre conga line. The center of the maze announced itself with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. We emerged from the final tunnel into a circular chamber carved from solid ice, its walls covered with the same bioluminescent strips that had guided us through the corridors. In the center of the chamber, sitting on a pedestal of carved ice, was the crystal beacon. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest tight. A multifaceted gem that seemed to contain its own internal light, pulsing with colors that had no names in any human language. And standing next to it, looking absolutely furious, was Instructor Veltar. Cadet Voss, he said, his voice carrying a tone I couldn't quite identify. You seem to have misunderstood the nature of this exercise. I slid to a stop in front of the pedestal, my makeshift team arranging themselves behind me. Did I, sir? The objective was to reach the center, retrieve the beacon, and return. I don't recall any restrictions on methodology. His 6 eyes narrowed to slits. This was designed to be an individual challenge. Then maybe you should have mentioned that in the briefing, I replied, standing up and dusting ice crystals off my thermal gear. As I understand it, the first rule of military operations is to complete the mission. Everything else is just details. I reached for the beacon, half expecting him to stop me. Instead, he just watched as I picked it up, its strange light playing across my gloves. Congratulations, he said, and there was something in his voice that might have been respect. You have successfully completed the trial in 47 minutes. A new academy record. Behind me, I could hear the other cadets murmuring in amazement. 47 minutes. Most of them had probably expected to be in the maze for hours. However, Veltar continued, I am curious about your unconventional approach to the challenge. I shrugged. Sometimes the best way forward is the path no one else thinks to take. Humans have a saying, if you can't go through the wall, go around it. If you can't go around it, go over it. If you can't go over it, find a way to make the wall work for you instead of against you. Zilmoth finished, his mandibles clicking in what I'd learned was Kethvar laughter. To Veltar looked between us, his expression unreadable. Indeed. Well then, Cadet Voss, shall we return to the surface? I believe your fellow humans will be quite interested to hear about your performance today. As we made our way back through the maze, sliding in formation like some kind of military unit, I couldn't help but smile. The Academy had designed this test to push us to our limits, to to separate the strong from the weak. Instead, it had taught me something far more valuable. Sometimes being human isn't about being stronger or faster or more resilient than everyone else. Sometimes it's about looking at an impossible situation and finding a solution so crazy it just might work. And sometimes it's about remembering that the best victories are the ones you share. The Academy's command center buzzed with activity as we emerged from a maze, dripping wet and grinning like idiots. Word had apparently spread about our unconventional approach, because half the faculty seemed to have gathered to witness what they were calling either a breakthrough in tactical thinking or a complete breakdown of military discipline, that I still had the crystal beacon clutched in my frozen fingers, its otherworldly light casting dancing shadows across the walls. Behind me, my impromptu rescue squad was still getting used to walking on normal floors again. Zilmoth kept sliding accidentally, his feet expecting ice that wasn't there. 47 minutes, muttered Professor Kexlin, the Academy's chief tactical instructor. She was a Velnari, one of those species that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a philosophy professor. In 47 minutes, this human accomplished what our best simulations predicted would take 3 hours minimum. More importantly, added Dr. Morthak, gesturing with 2 of his 4 appendages, she managed to extract 4 cadets who were experiencing severe environmental distress. Our medical sensors show that without intervention, at least 2 of them would have required emergency extraction within the next 30 minutes. Instructor Veltar stepped forward, his expression still unreadable. Cadet Voss, your performance today has raised several questions among the faculty. Questions about our assessment methods, our understanding of human capabilities, and most significantly, our definition of military excellence. I shifted uncomfortably under the weight of their collective stare. Sir, I just did what made sense at the time. Exactly, he replied, and that is what concerns us. Before I could ask what he meant by that, the command center's main entrance slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Through it stepped someone I'd hoped never to see again. Admiral Thexvar, the Academy's commandant and the closest thing to pure military evil I'd ever encountered. He was a Zalthari, which meant he looked like someone had taken a shark, given it legs, and taught it to wear a uniform. So, he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that commanding officers use when they are about to ruin someone's day, this is the human who thinks she's cleverer than 1,000 years of military tradition. The room fell silent. Even the background hum of the environmental systems seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Admiral, I said, snapping to attention and trying to keep my voice steady. Cadet Voss reporting as ordered. He circled me slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. Tell me, Cadet, what do you think you accomplished today? I completed the assigned mission, sir. Retrieved the beacon and returned safely. He stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell the sulfur on his breath. And you did this by sliding, like a child on a playground. I used the available resources to achieve maximum efficiency, sir. His laugh was like grinding metal. Resources? You turned a test of individual fortitude into a group exercise. You transformed a challenge designed to measure survival instincts into what can only be described as recreational activity. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, despite the lingering cold from a maze. With respect, sir, nowhere in a mission briefing was I told this had to be accomplished alone or in any particular manner. The objective was clear: reach the center, retrieve the beacon, return safely. Any other cadets? The ones you stopped to help. They were in distress, sir. Military protocol dictates. Military protocol. He interrupted. Dictates following orders, not reinterpreting them to suit your own moral sensibilities. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a plasma cutter. I could see the other faculty members exchanging glances, some supportive, others clearly agreeing with the Admiral's assessment. Then Zilmoth stepped forward. Sir, he said, his mandibles clicking nervously, if I may speak. Admiral Thexvar turned his predatory gaze on the Kethvar cadet. You may not. This is between me and, actually, came a new voice from the entrance. I think we'd all benefit from hearing what the cadets have to say." Everyone turned to see who had dared interrupt the Admiral. What we found was Commander Lisa Park, the human liaison officer and one of only 3 humans on the Academy staff. She was small, even by human standards, but she carried herself with the kind of confidence that made admirals think twice about arguing. "Commander Park," Admiral Thexvar said, his tone suggesting he'd rather eat vacuum than continue this conversation. "I wasn't aware you were monitoring this situation." "I monitor all situations involving human cadets," she replied smoothly. "It's my job, and from what I have observed, Cadet Voss has demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptive thinking we claim to value in our graduates." She walked over to where I stood, still at attention, still holding the beacon. "May I?" she asked. Gesturing to the crystal, I handed it over, grateful for any interruption that might defuse the situation. She held it up to the light, examining its faceted surface. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said conversationally. "The ancients who built this academy used these beacons as teaching tools. Do you know what they were meant to teach?" Nobody answered, though I suspected it was a rhetorical question. "Cooperation," she continued. "The crystal only achieves its full luminescence when it's been handled by multiple species. The more diverse the genetic markers it detects, the brighter it glows." She turned the beacon toward the assembled faculty. It was indeed glowing brighter now, pulsing with colors that seemed to shift and change as we watched. "This beacon," Commander Park said, "has been touched by human, Kethvar, Mordani, and Zilthri hands in the past hour. It's achieved a luminescence level I haven't seen in the 3 years I have been stationed here." Admiral Thexvar's expression was priceless. I could practically see him trying to figure out how to spin this revelation in a way that didn't make him look completely foolish. "The test," he said slowly, "was designed to measure individual capability." "Was it?" Commander Park asked. "Or was it designed to see which cadets would recognize that some challenges require cooperation to solve?" She handed the beacon back to me, and I noticed it was noticeably warmer now, as if our combined touch had awakened something inside it. "The Academy's mission statement," she continued, addressing the room rather than any individual, "speaks of training officers who can lead diverse forces in challenging environments. Tell me, which is more valuable? An officer who can solve problems alone, or one who can recognize when teamwork is the better solution?" The room erupted in discussion. Faculty members began arguing among themselves in a dozen different languages, their voices creating a cacophony that made my head spin. Through it all, Admiral Thexvar stood silent, his shark-like eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't interpret. Finally, he raised one clawed hand, and the room fell silent. "Very well," he said. "If we're going to debate the merits of unconventional tactics, then perhaps we need a more comprehensive test." Oh no, I knew that tone. That was the tone commanding officers used when they were about to make someone's life significantly more complicated. "Tomorrow," the Admiral continued, his smile showing far too many teeth, "we will conduct a full-scale war game. Human tactics versus traditional Academy doctrine. Cadet Voss will lead a mixed-species squad of her choosing. I will personally oversee the opposing force." The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the maze anymore. This had become a test of human military philosophy against alien tradition, with me as the unwilling representative of my entire species. "Sir," I began, but he cut me off with a gesture. "Unless, of course, you're not confident in your innovative approach." It was a trap, beautifully laid and perfectly executed. Refuse, and I'd be admitting that human tactics were only good for party tricks like sliding through ice mazes. Accept, and I'd be facing off against the Academy's most experienced tactical minds with a squad of cadets who'd never worked together before. I looked around the room, taking in the expectant faces of faculty and fellow cadets alike. Then I looked at the beacon in my hands, still pulsing with that warm, multicolored light. "I accept," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Admiral Thexvar's grin widened. "Excellent. The scenario will be urban pacification with civilian evacuation protocols. Your squad will defend a population center against superior forces. Rules of engagement will be full contact with stun weapons and environmental hazards. Full contact, of course, because nothing said fair test like getting shot at with weapons that could knock you unconscious or worse. You will have tonight to select your team and plan your strategy, he continued. The exercise begins at 0600 hours tomorrow. Try not to disappoint me, cadet. As the crowd began to disperse, I found myself surrounded by the cadets I'd helped in the maze. Zilmoth was the first to speak. I volunteer for your squad, he said without hesitation. As do I, added Frostwing, the Zilthri whose crystalline form had been stuck in the maze cornered Velka. The more Danny with the frozen fur stepped forward as well. You saved my life today. Honor demands I return the favor. I looked at them, these aliens who barely knew me, volunteering to face what was essentially a military tribunal disguised as a training exercise. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. You know, this isn't going to be like the maze, I said. The Admiral isn't going to go easy on us just because we're cadets. This is about proving a point, and he's willing to put us through hell to make it. Then we will go through hell together, Zilmoth replied, his mandibles clicking in determination. That night, I sat in my quarters staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how I'd gotten myself into this mess. Outside my window, the moons of Helix Prime cast their pale light across the Academy grounds, turning everything silver and strange. I'd gone from being an anonymous cadet trying to survive military school to being the poster child for human tactical thinking in the span of a single day. Tomorrow, I'd be leading a squad of aliens against some of the Academy's best instructors, with the reputation of my entire species riding on the outcome. An O pressure at all.my door chimed, indicating a visitor. I opened it to find Commander Park standing in the corridor, 2 cups of something hot and caffeinated in her hands. Thought you might need this, she said, offering me one of the cups. I accepted it gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. Real coffee, not the synthetic stuff from the mess hall. Thank you, ma'am. She stepped into my quarters without invitation, settling into the room's single chair while I perched on the edge of my bunk. You know, she said after a moment, when I first heard about your little adventure in the maze, I wasn't sure whether to be proud or terrified. I'm still not sure myself, I admitted. She laughed, a sound that carried warmth and understanding. That's the thing about being human, Kira. We're never quite sure if what we're doing is brilliant or insane until after we have done it. Any advice for tomorrow? Just one piece, she said, her expression growing serious. Don't try to beat them at their own game. They have been playing it longer than our species has had spaceflight. Instead, change the rules. Change the rules. She stood to leave, pausing at the door. You figured out how to turn ice into an advantage. Tomorrow, figure out how to turn being human into one. After she left, I sat there nursing my coffee and thinking about rules. About how the Academy taught warfare like it was a chess game, with predictable moves and countermoves. About how human history was full of victories won not by following the rules, but by rewriting them entirely to be by the time I finished my coffee, I had the beginning of a plan. It was crazy, potentially disastrous, and almost certainly against every regulation in the Academy handbook in other words, it was perfectly human. Tomorrow, Admiral Thexvar was going to learn what happened when you challenged a species that had conquered its homeworld not through superior strength or advanced technology, but through sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness and an absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Tomorrow, he was going to discover why the galaxy had started. Using humans, as both a battle cry and a warning. And if we were very lucky, we might all survive the lesson.